Okay, see you in a sec. Let's see if we have any viewers yet. I did just hit the go live button. So just FYI, mostly for Kyle.
No, no speaking.
Kyle. Hi, Meepy. We are having a little bit of technical difficulties right now, so we are working on that. Our third person is restarting their computer. How's the audio, Meepy? Can you hear us? Great. We'll give people a few minutes also to show up, filter in, including our third stream partner, hopefully. Maybe I'll blur my camera background for my husband's privacy. As I saw him walking back there. Welcome in, welcome in. I do need a green screen. That would be really cool. Welcome back, Christina. We are live, just FYI. Oh, nice.
Hello.
Webcam. It worked. Woohoo! Welcome in, Foxy Nix. Glad we got a lot of people rejoining from previous streams. Exciting. I did not promise to stream Final Fantasy VII. I should, though. That would be funny.
I'm down.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Foxy Nix asks, how are we doing today? Christina? Kyle, how are you doing today?
Great.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's sunny, so I'm happy.
It's not sunny here. For the first time, it feels like it's raining. First time chat from Firecat. Welcome. See, I don't see a thing. The alerts are not showing up on my screen, but hopefully they're showing up on the stream. But if not, we might just have to go without the alerts. Awesome. Starting to pick up some people joining. Hopefully this, I guess it's noon Pacific time. I think it's 8 or 9 p.m. European time, something like that. Hopefully this works better for some people who are trying to join the old ones, but they were too late in the day. Hello, hello. We'll give it one more minute for some last people to show up, and then we'll kick it off. We're excited to talk to you today. People in the chat are talking about the name of someone, Caffeine Cleric, which is the best name. I relate to this name, for sure.
With your ice cream.
Yeah. It's only noon. It's socially acceptable to have a coffee at this time. Though I was definitely also drinking an iced coffee at like 7 p.m. last night. You were like, you're so awake, and I was like, oh, maybe it's because I drank a coffee so late.
Yeah, you were hyper at like 10 p.m. Now I know why.
I do be doing that, though. That's prime gaming time. Awesome. Well, let's go ahead and get started. We will kick off with some intros and kind of introduce what we're going to be talking about today. So with us today, we have Christina and Kyle. Christina is the World Design Director and Design Director generally at Treehouse. Kyle is a Senior Environment Artist, really awesome, and also doing level design and a bunch of other cool stuff too, honestly. Man of many trades. Do you guys want to like introduce yourselves additionally at all, Christina?
Yeah, sure. Let's see. I've been at Treehouse for about 4 years. And I am, as Steph said, the design director here, bouncing around between many, many aspects of the game, getting to collaborate with some awesome folks. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what else.
What you got, Kyle?
I've been at Treehouse for 3 or 4 years, somewhere in there. And started as a tech artist, but I like environment art a bit more. So I kind of mix and match the two a little. I live in Minneapolis, and I like corn.
You like corn?
Yeah, I just need
What was
corn pancakes have kind of been my thing lately.
Corn
there
is
was some
good.
food dish I remember we talked about with corn? Corn, not pudding.
Hot
What was
dish?
it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
like a corn. It's like a corn pudding, scalloped corn.
Kyle
Oh
and
my
I
god.
are Midwesterners, holding it down. Although I'm West Coast now, I'm Midwest at heart.
Awesome. And then I guess I'm mostly hosting, so I think hopefully you'll hear mostly from Christina and Kyle today. But if you don't know me from the other streams, I'm Stephanie. I've also been here about 3 to 4 years, I think. We're all veterans at this point. I work in production, so I'm lead producer. I make like the roadmap, help get the playtest builds out to you guys, answer questions in Discord, kind of anything that needs to get done. I try to do it and try to lock down when we're going to ship you guys new and awesome content and what will be in it. So that is my main responsibility. I'm a Southerner originally, West Coast now. I think also kind of Southerner at heart. I miss the food. King
I was
cake,
making
yeah,
gumbo.
yeah. I make gumbo a lot. I do actually. It's on my list to do. I don't know if I'll get it done because there's so much going on. But I do normally make a king cake during Mardi Gras season because it's really hard to get king cake out here. Also, I'm surprised so many people in chat know about king cake. That makes me happy. Um, awesome. And today we're here to talk to you about the Reef, which is our second biome. So we're going to be kind of doing an intro and a walkthrough and talking about the process by how a biome even comes to fruition and like what that process is like. So hopefully there's some really exciting content for you guys today. And then hopefully this the Reef will be playable in some form. We're not sure yet if we're going to release the whole biome, if we're only going to release a portion of it. But hopefully a play testable version will be coming to our closed alpha testing really soon, and then we'll figure out if that gets to the demo and how many people get their hands on it. But new biome, yeah, coming soon. Really exciting. And then yeah, Mina and Kyle, I think one of you should just screen share probably, and I'll restream the Discord. So whenever you're ready, you can kick us off.
Yeah, I can do that. Let's see. Dream the correct window. Go.
Oh, I think I got the chat to show up, but the text is black, so you can't see it on the stream. That's funny.
Oh
We'll
no.
work on that.
Can you see this Miro board?
Oh, let's see. Boop boop.
Yeah.
Yes. I
Cool.
think.
Oh,
Yeah, it looks like the stream can see it too.
okay, great. So I'm just going to run you guys through some of our behind the scenes workflow that we do across art, design, the whole team. The way we start with a biome, we did a little bit of this info drop when we did the embrace talk, but we're going to kind of run you through how we got to the reef. So this biome is a little bit different. But our general workflow was the same. So we start with a brainstorm board. We love this program called Miro for whiteboarding. It's where we do a lot of our design work, art collaboration. It's really fun. You can draw on it, but also photos together collaboratively. So that's a big part of our workflow. But the way we start is we have a big board and we start concepting ideas on paper, as well as Mitch, if you've watched any of our other streams, our wonderful concept artist, Mitch comes up with these really cool designs for environmental spaces that he will drop down. And generally, as the creative director, he comes in with an idea of what the overall biome should be, like thematic of the biome. So in this one, it was kind of like a fantasy coral reef vibe. So we did a lot of ideation and talks about what that would be like in terms of gameplay, how we would split up space, and it ended up being that we decided to split the biome into this kind of lower level of water and sand and these high coral towers that you will ride these gusts of wind up to. So some of the real life inspiration was like a canyon, but taking the canyon and combining that with a reef and figuring out what would that look like, how would the gameplay space be, and then talking about what the gameplay beats would be. So we do a little bit of top-down mapping of what the actual like landscape will end up like, and that goes through many iterations. So that's just kind of a sneak peek of what that looks like. We all collaborate together. We go back and forth between art and design, and then Mitch works on various concepts, thinking about what the environment will look like, what the resource nodes will look like. And then as that continues, we get these more detailed concepts zoom in on. So Mitch will do call outs of like, hey, this is kind of what the landscape will look like. Here's the call out for these updrafts that we want players to interact with. He has some cool ideas for like how you might encounter a construct. And these new things that we're going to add, which are going to be missile spires. Talk a little bit more about later. So we kind of put these together, and then we move into an iteration that is more 2D on a top-down map. So with level design and gameplay in mind, we decide how to split up the biome across what we're calling zones. So we have this zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. So zone 1 is kind of where you start, and then these background shapes are very TBD, so don't expect the in-game map to look exactly like this. But we start by mapping out where we want all of these larger points of interest. So we have these things that we're calling ruins that players need to explore. We have the dormant spirit eggs. We have findables. And then with these zones, this is like the easiest zone, the green. The blue is sort of medium, so you'll find tier 2 enemies there. And then the third outer ring of the biome is the hardest, and that's where you complete the biome. So we collaborate on that, and then we spec out. This is like a snapshot of my spec in Confluence. So we kind of combine some of the fun art pieces, and then we talk about what the inspirations are, what the mechanics are, what our main theme of the biome is, what the debuff's going to be. And then we start to combine all these pieces together, and we get into Engine, then start to block it out with the landscape tool, which is what Kyle's going to talk more about in a little bit. And then while we're doing that, we have to keep in mind the overall relationship of biomes together. So it's not as simple as just starting to make the biome, but we have to think about how far is the embrace from the reef, where the future biome's going to be, how long does it take to sail in between them. And this snapshot is actually from Kyle. He was doing some thinking about the approach from the embrace where you start and what that looks like getting to the reef. So Kyle, I threw down some screenshots, but if you want to talk a little bit about some of the things you were considering, like moving one of the islands inward, and the approach from the embrace to the reef.
Yeah, it's kind of so it's not a linear game, right? Players can start from wherever they want to start, head in whatever direction they want to head. So all we can do is sort of maybe create landmarks to guide people in the direction that we would like for them to move. So we have an initial starting area for the reef that will represent a sort of a good initial building spot, kind of an introduction to this biome. And in the hopes of hopefully guiding players into that spot, we rearranged a few islands in the northeastern part of the embrace to sort of hint that this might be a good flow to follow. So like creating that initial area in the reef with enough tall landmarks so people can see it from far away, creating kind of a big opening that hopefully will look like a thing that you can sail through, and enough inside like land that looks like, oh, maybe I want to like land here and build a new base.
Here's some snapshots of what that. This is when you first come out of the tutorial, when you first are at the top of the lighthouse. So you can actually see this shadow here is the reef. This is from that main cove in the embrace. You can kind of see again from there. It's a little foggy, but and then as you sail and get closer, you will see outline of it. You'll see these mysterious storms that are inside of it, and then you won't see the debug text when we ship it to you guys, but but this is kind of what it will look like as you sail up onto.
I'm curious, because we did a lot of iteration on a few points too along the development of both the last biome actually and this biome. The first one I want to poke into a little bit actually is this like layout of the 2D map with the zones. Because that was something I think we were kind of like softly exploring in the embrace, where we kind of our original version was probably a little not factoring in that kind of like difficulty scaling. The embrace was like a little bit more flat. And then I think as we were like, how do we get people to like explore further out and earn more, we kind of like traipsed into this kind of like layout, and then this is like I think are really like, hey, we think that's working, we're codifying it. So I wonder if you could dig a little bit into like why you kind of landed there and like how that evolved.
Kyle, do you want to talk about it, or you want me to take it?
Sure. Well, I mean, so you created the initial bubble map, right? So you have a sense of what that process was like and what your priorities were at that stage.
Yeah, I can talk about that part. Yeah, Kyle and I do a lot of a back and forth. I'm considering more of how I'm spacing the gameplay actors out across the entire biome, and Kyle has a really good feeling for sight lines, for height navigation, for kind of leading players through spaces. I think he's really excellent at that. So we kind of go back and forth from those 2 points of view. So when I'm thinking about the overall biome, I'm thinking about where you start and the kind of breadcrumbing we want to do as you move through these spaces. So we want to make sure each zone of progression has enough content in it that you feel engaged and you spend a significant amount of time there and run into challenges as you navigate out. So when you start in this kind of bottom left corner, this is going to be the smoothest, easiest point of interaction for you in the biome. As you venture out, you get more compelling rewards like these spirits. And up here at this ruins, this is going to be the most difficult portion of this zone, which borders on the second zone. So you kind of graduate out of that once you complete that. It's not linear because it's survival crafting. Technically, if you want to run all the way to the other end of the biome, you can do that. But it's designed in such a way that you'll naturally navigate through these gradations of difficulty, and you get all these little breadcrumbs along the way. So we tried to lead you through the biome in a more orderly fashion, even knowing that it is survival crafting. We can't really expect you to do everything linearly. We gradate these challenges as you move forward through enemies, through the ruins, and through these other things that these big purple circles are spires that are pictured over here, which are going to create a volume that triggers a debuff on you. So you're going to have to go in here and destroy these to make your gameplay experience a lot more accessible to you. So those are some diegetic landmarks as you move through the space. So there's a lot to keep you occupied in one zone before you move to the next zone. And the pressure of combat difficulty scaling up through the biome is what we use to kind of pull you back into the zone that's more comfortable for your current gear score and abilities.
Awesome.
I don't know, Kyle, if you want to have
Yeah, I was
anything to
gonna
add
ask
to that.
because
Yeah.
I know Kyle. We talked about also, and I think I agree that Kyle is excellent at like creating sight lines and like visual interest and things that like players want to go explore. Like so, when you're looking from even like the beginning of Zone 1, you can kind of like see this far off thing in like Zone 2. So I wonder if you want to talk a
Yeah.
little bit about how you think about that, Kyle.
Honestly, it might be a good point to switch the stream to
Mm.
Kyle showing off the editor if you're ready. We can kind of do the fly through as you talk about that.
Yeah, totally.
Cool.
So let me know when you can see my stream.
I can see it. There it
Cool.
is,
This is
everybody.
the Reef. So we had Mitch's incredible concept for this environment. So one of the first things that I did was to try to pull in a lot of materials and shapes that would get us a little bit closer to Mitch's concept. And once I had those tools to work with, I looked at Mina's map. And I think you created the initial layout in Engine.
Yeah.
And then we had to kind of think about the scale differential between something like this 2D map, which is more about the information and the relationships of things, and translate that into an actual gameplay space where, like a player is going to be traveling from A to B. It might take them a lot longer than we want. So we have to scale things up and down. We realized after a few internal playtests that the map was feeling way too large for the Reef. So we cut it down quite a bit. This is all still in flux, but we had kind of an additional, I don't know, 25% up here that we were like, it's too much space to cover. So looking at the bubble map, we tried to kind of keep things roughly the same. So like this landmark down here corresponds to this one here. We've got some kind of important central areas that we wanted to recreate in the 3D map. And so those are all represented in this space, but the size of everything and kind of the specific locations are going to change. We spent most of our time in this lower left quadrant here. We're calling it Zone 1. This is kind of the intro, the easy spot. This is our proof of concept internally, like making sure that it feels like a sufficiently different biome, making sure that our resource distribution and density feels good, that the different playstyles that we're encountering in this biome are fun and robust. So like there's going to be more platforming, more verticality in this biome than we saw in the Embrace. So we spent a fair amount of time on Zone 1, and now we're kind of moving into this zone here, which we're calling Zone 2, which is going to be a little bit more difficult. It'll present some new challenges and some new resources. So that's what we're currently working on.
Awesome. And then I think you kind of mentioned it a little bit too, but I think part of the tension we actually ran into into in this biome, especially when we did the original size, was kind of interesting because we were like in measurement space, the biome was actually very similar in size to the embrace generally, but with like kind of two main factors kind of impacting that, which were some of like the spacing of the water, where we're actually trying to make this a more water focused biome. The embrace was very like land focused, I think, especially because it's like your first biome and you're just kind of like getting into the game and you're getting introduced to sailing and all of these mechanics. But hopefully by this point you are a pro sailor and skimmer and you can like really expertly navigate, through these spaces. So we're kind of like creating some room for that and like the verticality like you mentioned. So you want to like talk a little bit about some of the challenges of like realizing, I don't know how much impact vertical space makes, or at least like impervious.
Yeah. It's funny. I feel like for me at least, the first thing I reach to is some quantifiable metric. Like, okay, well, if we just measure the embrace, and we want to create a space that's roughly equivalent to that, you create, something that like in terms of kilometers or whatever is the same size. But the feeling is what ends up mattering the most. And the way that this biome is shaping up, there's just a lot more nooks and crannies and things to explore. There's a lot more verticality. There's a lot more platforming up and down. And that vertical space kind of expands the density and the perceived size. I don't know if any of this makes any sense, but we tried it by just kind of copying one-to-one the measurement of the previous biome. But then in practice, it just felt wrong. So based on those feels and like feedback that we got from internal playtests, we kind of brought things closer together and scaled things down. We wanted to have the initial read with these new coral spires to be really impressive. We wanted it to feel like, wow, this is like such a vertical biome. And to really play off of the kind of fun feeling of coral growing upward out of the water. But the initial towers that we built were ridiculously tall. They were like skyscrapers, and it seemed fine until we got in the game and ran around, and then ended up just feeling kind of very silly. So we may build up to something a little bit taller in some of the later areas of the biome, but in general, everything needed to be scaled way, way down. It just was too big from the get-go.
And also, when you're trying to talk about like populating this big space too, do you want to walk through? I know we've talked about it a little bit in a past stream, but I think there's a lot of new viewers. How do you kind of like go about actually getting stuff into this space and like built?
Yeah, that is a challenge. We have a small team. We don't have hundreds of people and millions of dollars and years to spend on this. So we need to figure out how to make our effort stretch. We're using a built-in feature in Unreal Engine called PCG, which stands for Procedural Content Generation. It's not AI, like, tell the computer to make art or whatever. It lets you use logic to place things based on some rule sets that you come up with. So this tree, for example, and this moss and the stuff growing underneath it is placed procedurally. So I can grab this volume. Let's see if this works. I'm going to move it over here and then regenerate it. So it uses the rules that we set, which says like, okay, generate a tree. And then around the tree, place some resource nodes. Make sure that they don't intersect with each other. And then around those resource nodes, maybe place a slightly more rare and unusual resource node. And then beneath all of it, scatter this moss, which just kind of sort of grounds the whole area a bit. The actual innards of that look like this. So this is called node-based programming. Each of these little boxes is a node, and they're connected with these wires to form logic. I'm terrible at coding, but I love visual stuff like this. It just is how my brain works. So I'm like, okay, step by step, here's how it works. We grab some points in space and we scale them and we rotate them to make them kind of random and organic. And we check to make sure they don't intersect. And then we take whatever array of information we want. Like we could give it, 3 different kinds of trees. And it'll be like, okay, I'm going to randomly scatter those 3 trees around. And yeah, step by step, we hopefully end up with something that is going to give us some pretty reliable results that are also hopefully not going to look too repetitive. We're making an organic space and we want it to feel like each area is growing somewhat organically and naturally. So PCG was used to place all of this stuff. We've got, these guys are if hand by hand placing anything, it would be like, all right, I'm gonna put this over here.
That's what I was doing the other day.
Let's see, that looks good there, and that's fine if you're going to place like a couple big things, or if you're going to be like the rocks are mostly placed by hand because we need to really control platforming and make sure that things are like looking kind of nice and lining up properly. But for something that is supposed to be kind of random and messy, it's so much easier to just regenerate it, and be like, okay, we roughly need some of these hazards in this area. So, allow the computer to do the random math to kind of splatter these in whatever spot we want them to be.
And I think it seems a lot more straightforward than it honestly is, because there's a lot of thought going into how these are architected to have relationships with one another. So Kyle's done a lot of work to make these feel very organic and natural, and he's very thoughtful when he's constructing these graphs and working also, I assume, like with Mitch to figure out what the right feeling is here. But he's making these like clusters of resource nodes that we can place in groups together, so it's not just one chunk of resources at a time, but it's making this little ecosystem essentially. And so it seems straightforward, like you pull the box in, it generates a bunch of stuff, but there's a lot of thought and design going into how these objects are placed, how far apart they are from one another, if they can overlap, their scale and size and relationships to one another. So I want to highlight that that's a whole art in and of itself to design those. And that's Kyle, your tech art is showing.
Thanks. Yeah, we hopefully want the world to feel somewhat intuitive, and for players to get a sense that like, okay, so like once I encounter these sour gourds, which is a food resource in this biome, we want players to be able to roughly know that they will probably be able to find them growing around these kind of vegetal patches that have also a honey mushroom and these trees. And maybe you wouldn't find a sour gourd, on the beach, for example, because it wouldn't grow on sand. So yeah, creating those little like micro ecologies is a lot of the fun of the game making process, for me at least.
That's a really good segue, but I'm going to pause this in the middle. But it's a good segue into one of the topics we want to cover, which is kind of like the balance between and handoffs between like design and gameplay and like level design and like art. And like how that kind of process evolves with considerations. Yeah, like where should food show up, and yeah, like how do players like learn that. But before, because we have a lot of questions and like first time chats too, so I wanted to get to a little bit of those. A question came up about climbing. Mina, you already took a pass at answering that, but I just want to like double tap on that question, like, so will we add climbing, or why would we add climbing or not add climbing? So climbing is like, I think like Christina already kind of mentioned in chat too, a kind of complicated both feature from implementation, but also in terms of like how you traverse the world. It becomes like a really complex thing that impacts a lot of like how the level design is designed, and like also how players can access and like what they can access and how we can gate them. But it is a really highly requested feature, and our world is like really cool and explorable. And especially, I think people are going to feel that a lot with this new vertical space. So it is something we're kind of keeping track on, trying to understand if we want to kick into that, or and why or why not. Um, just to set expectations, it's something if we did do it, it will not come until post early access launch. So that's going to be something farther out for our team, as we're trying to really make sure that there's like enough gameplay and content and a bunch of the things that we think like we can support as a team. And climbing is just like a little bit more not bite sized enough for us to be able to just like take a swing at it, unfortunately. Something that was mentioned and asked about in the chat that is coming that will help you traverse this vertical space is gliders. We mentioned, I think, earlier in the stream, and there were some questions about it, but gliders are like the kind of like key feature, I would say, of this biome, and like why it's so vertical. And there's like updrafts and like other things that are going to help you kind of traverse and explore that vertical space. So yeah, gliders are going to come in this patch and hopefully be the main way that you really explore these like vertical spaces outside of building, which is also still going to be a tool that you have to be able to explore those spaces. And then a last question I think that I think is worth just calling out, because people that have been playing the demo build right now actually have felt some of the pain, I think, of rocks feeling like a little slippery and our jump height being a little restrictive, and it being like really hard to get up on some of these rocks that feel like you should be able to jump on them but are just out of your reach. We felt that too. We felt that a little bit in the old biome, but we especially felt it while working on this new, more vertical biome. And so we were kind of at first to kind of tweak the level and get it to where you could like jump on every rock, but then we had to make these like super long, like ugly rock staircases that were like 1,000,000 miles long because like the jump height was so low. So we've actually done some tweaks to the character movement too, knowing now that like as we're seeing this come together that that's kind of like a big gap, and so you should be able to jump a little higher. You should be able to like actually crest some of these like ledges that you were like not able to before, so we hope that that will be enough to kind of bridge the gap between some of what you're feeling even in the current build, with traversal being like a little bit more challenging than you expect in like an unfun way and hopefully it'll be a little easier to get around, a little easier to jump onto rocks, a little easier to get where you're trying to go. So I just wanted to pause just to answer some of those questions because I thought this was a good time to get into those before we go too much deeper into the content. And we'll take more questions at the end of the stream too, so we'll budget a little bit of time. But yeah, so let's maybe segue into, yeah, Kyle, you kind of mentioned like when you're one of the considerations when you're making the PCG graphs and helping get the world populated is this kind of balance of like how do players like learn gameplay mechanics and even like where do gameplay mechanics need to happen. And Christina, obviously you're the like a big part of actually like what are the gameplay mechanics, how do they get into the world, and like what do we need to be teaching and showing players. So maybe Christina, do you want to kick us off actually on some of like the way that game design interfaces with like level design and art and how those mechanics kind of come to life in the game?
Yeah, I can talk a little bit about that. It's interesting because now we have multiple people owning different portions of the gameplay interactions. So we have Billy, our economy designer, doing so much work back and forth with Kyle, talking about resources. And then Kyle's thinking about it more from the integration with the environment, as well as what's fun to go and explore and what draws your eye, right? And Billy has this like giant cool economy map where he's got like every single item in the game in his brain and how they all connect to each other. So he's thinking of it from what's the density in any zone or in any biome? What's the overlap between those? So we have someone just thinking about that. We have Kyle thinking about the level design and the environment art kind of at the same time. So what you're seeing and how you move through the space, what draws you to different places. We have Tim, our combat designer, thinking about how the enemies actually function. And then I kind of jump in to help with gameplay interactions, like setting up where the findables are, sometimes where spirits are, also enemy camps, and also sometimes with level design. So we're all kind of doing multiple handoffs at the same time and trying to play test really frequently and get the feeling that we want out of each zone and each biome. But we have to do a lot of consideration around how often you're running into any particular gameplay actor. So we're thinking about, we want to have stretches of time where you can run around and just explore and gather, but we don't want it to be too peaceful, right? We want to make sure that you're running into enemies and you're experiencing challenge and you're experiencing friction. So there's ocean enemies, there's enemies on the landscape. But we want to make sure you're not overrun with enemies, because there's a fine line between feeling frustrated by that gameplay experience versus feeling challenged and engaged. So there's a lot of consideration around mapping just where the enemies go, how we set dress the enemy camps to give you visual signaling so that you can see from a distance, oh, there's like with our reef hops, we have a bunch of scaffolding and structures, and they have little houses that they live in. So you're able to kind of gauge from a safe distance, do I want to go over there and get into that? And if I do, is there something worthwhile? Like, do I see a chest? Do I see some resources that I want? We want to make sure the enemies are not just hanging out in space for no reason. They need to be guarding something that you want to draw you into that friction moment. And then similarly, we have a whole underwater space that Kyle has been thinking about authoring, and how, like, what's the distance between PCG nodes in the water? How far down should you swim to get certain things? How do we signal to players that there is glowstone in this area and seaweed in another area? Then we have a whole vertical gameplay space now with this biome, so you can kind of see in Kyle's screen that there's some unique assets up high. There's these unique like coral trees you don't really see at the lower level on the sandbar. So you have to go up and figure out how to get up there. Eventually use your glider to navigate between these taller spaces. So we're trying to keep you engaged at every level of gameplay, below the water, on the sand level, high up. It's a lot of space to fill, and there's a lot of balancing that has to happen as we're thinking about, we don't want you to get too many resources. We want to make sure you have sinks for your resources. We want to make sure you're engaged with enemies but not overrun. We want to make sure that you're excited to go gather spirits, and that when you do, there's an adequate challenge waiting for you there. And then outside of that, there's environmental storytelling that we're trying to do. So we have ruins, we have pieces of these ancients. So everywhere you go, we're hoping that the world feels really telling you a story of what happened here a long time ago and what the world is like now. So outside of just the natural landscape, we have to do some consideration of how often you run into these interesting set dressing pieces and what they actually tell you about the world. So all of us collectively are kind of thinking about all of those things together. And then there's a whole nother layer with your skimmer and your boat, and we could probably save that for its own stream, honestly. But collaboratively as a team, we're all going back and forth from our different points of views and trying to find the right balance between all of these actors.
Yeah, Kyle, anything you want to add? Or anything you want to show us like as examples in like the game? I see this like spiky rock guy.
Spiky rock guy?
What's the, like the what is this thing? Corrupted spire,
Oh,
like husk.
yeah, the dried out spire on the bottom
Oh,
right.
these guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these mostly, I mean, they're not, they have no gameplay utility. They mostly are meant to just suggest to players that here be hobs, you know, like they are meant to support like an intuitive understanding of like what this world works like. So we want, you know, you might see some reef hobs without creepy, spiky, dangerous looking stuff like this nearby, but for the most part, we want to kind of thematically reinforce this idea that this is a dangerous area. These guys, this is razor coral. This actually will harm you. It'll knock you back. So while you're fighting reef hobs, you also have to be mindful of those kind of environmental threats. And hopefully, you know, the more of those you see, the more of a sense that you may have that, like, oh gosh, all right, I'm gonna have to be kind of careful over here because, like, clearly, you know, there's some danger.
Yeah, using that spike to be like, maybe I don't want to run into. And those razor coral we keep talking about, if you run into them, they will kind of explode and puff out and knock you back and damage you. So that's a whole other environmental threat that's going to be new to our gameplay loop that you'll have to deal with.
And actually, something we kind of touched on a little bit, but glossed over, but I think is kind of interesting, is that especially for people that maybe are playing the demo but haven't played some of the alpha tests or heard some of the plans for this, the Reef is actually the home of the Reef Hobs, as we call it. It's like the true place where they're actually from. Before they were kind of our generic enemy that was like all over the world because we just really had like a limited tool set of enemies at the time because enemies are kind of expensive to develop and we wanted to be more confident about what we were going to do there and what we needed. So actually in an upcoming update, the Embrace has been updated with some new enemies that better fit that kind of world and setting in that biome. And the reef hubs have moved. They have taken up shop in the reef instead. So you will still see those guys. They'll be a little familiar to people who have played a lot. But there are some new enemies coming out in the first biome.
Well, I thought maybe you could show off that debug height material. Talk a little bit about thinking about the trenches and the slope, kind of how we define the ocean leading up to all of the sandbars.
Yeah, so what I just did is I'm going to hide all of what are called static meshes. So this rock, for example, is a 3D mesh, you know, created in Blender or ZBrush, whatever. It's got a texture. It's you know, it looks like this, and those are really useful as props to place in the world. But underneath all of it is what's called the landscape. So this thing is like it's a built-in function of the editor where you paint a height map and you can get like a nice broad organic rolling shape to your game world. It doesn't do great when it comes to verticality because it is sort of projected down. So you get, you know, like a cliff, so to speak, would look pretty ugly and nasty, which is why we cover it up with static meshes. But it is a really great way to very quickly and organically sketch out gameplay space. So we are an underwater game, and sailing is a big part of our game design. So it's really important for us to have a sense of how deep that water is. Boats won't be able to sail through really shallow water that a player might be able to run across, for example. So I put a little bit of time recently into developing a debug visualization for the height of this landscape terrain. So anything that is this sort of bright blue color that you see here is walkable to the player. So with this debug visualization, we know that like in this area, maybe we want to suggest that players build here, and we want it to be really convenient for them to like get across the water to these other areas. So it's really useful for us to be able to say, okay, clearly this light blue stuff is all walkable. Versus we might want to have some resources that only spawn in the deeper areas of the ocean, because we want to lure players down there in search of higher end rewards. But there'll also be, of course, more dangerous enemies and oxygen deprivation to balance out as part of that. So being able to visualize where the deeper parts of the ocean are is also really valuable. It also helps get a sense of like that slope that we saw before. So anything orange here is going to be sort of like not something that a person could walk up and down. And also generally something that we probably want to cover up with a static mesh. When you're actually editing the landscape, it is a lot like painting. It's kind of like halfway between painting and sculpting. So I'm just adding height here, removing height. I can smooth it all out. We can say like make it completely flat, for example. So usually if we're creating a new gameplay space, it's good to start flat, and say like, okay, so like this will be a big terraced area here, and then we can create a ramp for players to descend. This is probably too steep. You can see it's kind of like halfway between green and orange, but create a ramp for players to descend. And then once you get your general shape here, like I'm going to want this to be sand. Then you can kind of smooth it out and make sure it looks roughly how you want it to look. This is going to be the ugliest island ever. But from there, you can go in and add those static mesh actors and say like, yeah, so like maybe we want to add some cliffs to the edge here. So it's a little bit of a manual process from here on out. Like let's place these here, and that looks pretty good. And we can't see the cliff there. And then you do the PCG population on top of that. We do have some shortcuts that we can take. So for example, if we do want to quickly sketch out an area, I can just tile these rocks along this spline. So this looks repetitive, so we would want to cover this up. But there's a bit of randomization, but it doesn't look quite natural, but it can be kind of a good first pass that you can then come in later on and cover up with stuff that might look a little bit less repetitive. Like we could wedge one of these guys in there.
And this is where it really comes in clutch that Kyle is a tech artist and environment artist and level designer too. Because setting up these like splines and like the way that this actually like populates is its own like piece of work that's like actually like really difficult and specialized. So good job, Kyle, being so cool.
Extremely multi-talented.
I mean, everybody in our team it's one of my favorite things about working here. So that's that.
Cool. Why don't we do a little, I can do a little demo of our glider and updrafts. Show off some of the new gameplay elements.
I will note to you guys too, the glider is still pretty whip. We have some like animation work planned for it, so it's like it's very prototypey right now. So don't be alarmed.
Temp animations. Okay, it's just my local editor right now, but you can see from the ground level. Okay, that's fine. If you look up, even after the downscaling, this is still pretty high. It's pretty enormous in a cool way though. We can demo jumping into this. See, it's gonna take you way up. You can glide around, get to these resources you wouldn't be able to access otherwise. It gives you a great vantage point. And the glider is something you're gonna have to work to unlock once you're in the biome. You won't have it immediately, so you'll kind of experience the biome
as a land dweller.
Yeah, as a land dweller, and then you will work your way up to getting this new freedom of movement. Also, sneak peek of these new collectibles. So lots of really cool things that you'll be able to interact with and collect here. And you can see that the feeling of the reef is very different as we run around it. It's just much more vertical. There's a lot more sightline blockers. It's gonna feel very different from the Embrace overall. I think the color palette alone really sets it apart too. And we have more of these. Kyle did a great job with these little like islands that kind of interconnect through these more shallow portions of water. So a lot of this is more walkable, even in the water. So it leads to a very different feeling, or skimmable, once you have your super cool skimmer.
Yeah, this is actually, I feel like, one of my favorite parts of this biome versus like the Embrace too. It's just like a lot more water around, which I think is like the really cool and like unique mechanic of our game, or at least one of them. And so it's really cool to be kind of going through like sailing the boat in between all these like little islands, hopping off your skimmer, skimming around, like swimming and diving for underwater resources, which I think we kind of alluded to it a little bit earlier in the stream too, but um, we were, feeling, especially after our demo, like, hey, we're really lacking a lot of like exciting underwater content, and that's like a thing we really want to deliver on. Is one of like the promises we hope to make about the game in terms of like what you should expect from this like very aquatic world. Oh shit!
Well,
Oh. uh, and so we're really going to expand the amount of like underwater gatherables. We're working on some new enemy types, and so we're really hoping to amp up how much you're in and under the water. And this biome, I think, really does a great job, honestly, of like showcasing that. Yeah, don't touch spiky things.
yeah, I died. That was rough.
Oops.
The
Final
other,
balance.
I know Tim's going to do a more combat deep dive in the future, but the other fun thing I wanted to show off was part of how we have to set up enemies is you'll see these funny little cutouts of our reef hobs. The way we do it is we have an actor spawning volume. So you'll see when I have these all turned on, our world is just cube land, cubes as far as the eye can see. And we have to kind of set up this volume that says, okay, anybody in this circle, any of these guys, they will spawn if they're in here. And then separately, we have a box around them that says, anyone in this, probably kind of hard to see many boxes. There's a large box like right here. Anyone in this box, you're considered in the like combat zone. So these guys will continue to aggro you and chase you around as long as you're in this box. So now that you've seen that, you'll know how to game it and run right outside of here if you want to. If you want to leash them. Yeah. So what we do here is we have these many folders and actors of enemies. We manually set up their spawn points and construct them in different ways. And then in this spawner volume, we have to set their actor table as well, which tells the game, here's what I want to spawn and at what level, initialize them with these stats, things like that. So we do this for every group of enemies you see in the game. We've placed these volumes here. We dragged around the spawn points. And we set up these little, come up here to this one. Tim set this one up. This is a little encampment. So if I go into more like game mode, you can see they've built a little structure up here, and they are guarding some goodies. Possible. Oh, guy.
Huh, it's a little guy.
And they above this very epic king. You can see the world without water. This is a desert game. If we pivoted to a desert game.
Next biome.
Yeah. Yeah, that's our sneak peek into the reef, how it's made, and what it looks like right now.
Awesome. And that can transition us into a few more questions because we've had a few more kind of come in over time. And some I'll hit on that were like way up in the chat. I don't remember who asked them, so I'm sorry about that. But a couple questions came up around like fishing and kind of like the state of it and some observations even of like, where did Sheep Shark and Dagum and other things go? And we have some, I guess, Mina, I don't know if you want to try to speak on it because I know we don't have like the person working on the fishing stuff here, or I can try to.
Yeah, that's a Billy question. They want the sheep shark.
They want the sheep shark. I can give a little context into why you might see some shifts there and like what we're planning. And some people even notice and ask questions like, where is fishing in like this version of the game? We did temporarily remove the fishing mechanic as it existed. We're really hoping actually to revamp it into a type of mechanic that will help hit some of our goals of getting you into the water and that being like a really fun and kind of like exciting experience and adding like a little bit more gameplay around fishing too. So we're kind of relooking into how that works mechanically. We're exploring like spearfishing and like kind of underwater fish gathering basically, and you may get fish some other ways too. in the future. But so that's a mechanic we're kind of working on right now. That does mean I think we're gonna shift some of the fish content that we were giving too, because we had like they were all icons before, so it was really easy to have like I don't know 20 types of fish when they're all just a different kind of icon. But now that they're gonna be like real things in like the world, and they're gonna be like actually creatures that you have to find and like gather and maybe fight. They're gonna actually have like their own models, and so they'll be a little bit more unique. But we probably will have a lower diversity of fish, but Sheep Shark and Dagon we can keep on the backlog if people really like those ones. But that's a little bit why some of those shifts in fishing you're kind of seeing emerge in the build right now. We're in a little bit of like an in-between state. But so hopefully soon we'll have some updates on that.
I also saw a question about spirits. Will there be a spirit related to your glider? And that could also be its own stream. But we are heavily updating spirits and what they do. I won't give too many spoilers, but they're going to be a lot more useful and have different types. Very, very different from how it exists currently in the game. So look forward to that. But yeah, that could probably be its own stream where we just talk about that redesign.
Yeah, we are trying to, in case anyone's like, oh my god, I love spirits, and like, that's so scary to me. We are trying to keep some of the things that players are telling us most that they love. So you'll still have like your little spirit buddy. You'll still get like abilities and called affinities currently that you unlock. So we found that those were really exciting for people, and we want to keep those. And we actually want to kind of like double down. We're like, people really like these actually. So like, how can we have more things that are exciting like that? So we're kind of exploring ways that you can kind of have more spirit abilities. You can still have your little buddies like flying around with you. And elder spirits are their own thing, like the spirit of the ocean that gives you like the really cool upgraded skimmer. We'll still have like elder spirits kind of going forward, and they'll give you like really cool rewards as well. But yeah, we do have a lot of pending work about the spirits, so hopefully a lot of exciting updates. There was another question about being able to customize the glider, and is the glider available in the current demo? Glider is not available in the current demo. Coming soon, TM. You will unfortunately see an icon of it in the knowledge tree, but you cannot get it yet. Big sad.
Reef exclusive.
Yeah, Reef exclusive. Thanks for the follow. Someone just followed. And customizing the glider, we're not sure about how customizable our different kind of assets will be long term. It's a lot of work for our small team. We're actually kind of peeling back some of the customization we had before a little bit so that we can offer other options like armor and like more progression driven cosmetics basically versus like pure cosmetics and variation. So you'll see some changes also coming into the future demo updates around those kind of areas. But you know that's not off the table in terms of like will there ever be customization of these things, and or will there be like just different styles of glider, things like community rewards and Twitch rewards or stuff, or some like we're looking into those kind of options to offer some of those cosmetics. So keep looking out for cosmetic variations of your favorite things. Let's see. I'm scrolling through. Sorry, there's a lot of chats.
Someone mentioned an aquarium. That would be really cool to show off some of the fish.
Yeah, please. That'd be so cute.
Taking notes. Great idea.
Will these proposed updates be implemented into the demo updates? It depends on which ones. But we're trying to figure out exactly how much we showcase on the demo. I think like actually some people called out in chat already. The demo is quite long, especially if you want to continue to like play and build after the like official demo content. You know, we maybe have 2 to 5 hours of story content depending on like how you know, I guess fast you go through that. But we don't actually like time limit the demo, and there's a lot of content to explore, a lot of things you can build. You can build basically infinitely. And so people are putting in a lot of hours into the demo already. Some of these updates we do want to ship to the demo. We actually just updated the demo yesterday to add some really highly requested player features. So if you, well, one, if your data got wiped, sorry, that's our fault. We updated the demo, and we will be wiping the data between each update because we are making, like we said, some like big changes. Like we're removing the fishing rod, and we're like reworking all the cooking recipe. Like all kinds of stuff is changing under the hood that will mess up your data. So we do have to reset it pretty aggressively, unfortunately. But we just shipped an update to the demo yesterday, adding like keybinds, adding like sleep through the night functionality, improvements to combat, improvements to enemy spawning, and a bunch of like really improvements to hunger, like a overhaul basically of the hunger system. So a lot of really cool updates just went to the demo yesterday, directly targeted at a bunch of people's feedback. And we do plan to update some of this content to the demo too. Like I imagine at least like one zone of the reef and some of the glider and some of that will probably make it to the demo. But we're a little cautious of like releasing the whole game, on the demo. And so we're trying to find the balance of how many updates actually make it through there and like what is important to update.
Yeah, everyone's feedback for people playing the demo, people in our Discord, your feedback has been really great. The team, we read the Discord, we collate all the feedback that we're getting. It's been really helpful to development. And it's, as developers, it's great to have the demo out there and get to interact with people. And finally, the thing we've been working on, people are playing it, they're enjoying it, even if they're frustrated at times or run into bugs or issues. It's really awesome to kind of get to have a relationship with the community. So we've been really grateful to the people who are playing the demo and engaging with us, and we really appreciate your feedback. Whether it's positive or critical, it's all very helpful to know what you like, what you don't like, and we're doing our best to incorporate that, into our thinking as we move forward.
Yeah, we actually, I just talked about this with Ryan. Ryan is our game director. He's been on some of the previous streams, but we were like, actually, how could we do a better job of like really consistently like looking at incorporating this feedback? So we're thinking about this honestly, like all the time. Like me and Ryan are changing like the way that we have meetings so that we can like regularly like look through the feature upvote board and try to like factor in this work into like what we're already thinking about. We're surfacing feedback to the designers. The designers are reading through feedback. We send out surveys. We're trying to get really as much data as we can because, yeah, it's really important to us to get that feedback because we don't want to end up in a spot where we're making a game that like nobody wants. We make a game because we want to share a world and a bunch of excitement with people in the community and people who are excited about it. So we're always really thinking about what. Hang in there, Kyle. uh, we're always really thinking about what people are saying and how we can do a better job of basically factoring in that feedback and balancing that with our development priorities. Are there any other questions that people have? Any questions for Kyle? AK actually did say up in the chat earlier, he's like, I want Kyle to decorate my house.
I want
You have a
Kyle to
good
pick
vibe.
the colors of my walls because I love the color in your office.
Oh, you did ask a boat question, Elle. Sorry
Oh,
about that. It's farther up. It was about
Kyle, they
a
want the
solo
corn
boat.
pancake recipe.
I can do that.
Yeah. Oh my,
Post it
I
on
want that
Discord.
too. Yeah.
The secret is a can of creamed corn.
Okay, sorry, back to the boat.
It's okay. Post it in the foodies channel in Discord. Anyway, there was a question about will we introduce a solo sailing compatible boat because it's really hard, especially as a solo player, to sail the boat currently. We're kind of keeping an eye on this feedback. I think we really like some of the things about the like two-station boat, both even in the solo navigational challenge, but also to offer that like co-op opportunity and help you want to play with people more. But we're definitely receptive to the feedback that it's a huge pain in the ass and people don't like it. So we're really working on that feedback. We haven't yet committed to are we going to make a fully solo boat because we think some of the reasons the feedback is coming up, and we could be wrong, but are because even like the base mechanics of the boat are like a little janky. Like the camera like jerks you around when you go into the station. It's not really responsive. It's hard to tell what state the boat is at, like how fast it's going. Is it in reverse mode? Is it stopped? So we're actually going to target some of that feedback first, try to make the overall boat experience better. Our really awesome designer Ben is working on that with one of our engineers, Meg. They're doing a great job. So they're really trying to improve that first, and then be like, hey, is this feedback the same? Has it changed? Is that need still there? And then we'll probably evaluate what we want to do from there if that's still a thing that people are really feeling. We are offering, there is a new boat that is a little smaller. It's a little slower too, and it has a little less storage, but it is smaller, so it's a little easier maybe too for a solo player to navigate. So maybe that will help you too. So we have some updates coming, but definitely keep giving us feedback if it doesn't make it better because we're definitely cognizant that that is like a pain point right now. Lots of big boat improvements coming. We should actually do a sneak peek of that soon. That would be really cool.
Yeah, we should.
Will we be able to build on the boat? Which is probably our last question for the stream because since it's now over this slot, we probably have to end it right on time. But last question, will we be able to build on the boat? Currently, we are not able to build on the boat. We are not currently working on being able to build on the boat, but being able to like upgrade and like modify your boat over time is something we're interested in. We were hoping we were going to be able to work on it soon, but just with the amount of like updates to the underwater content and the base boat mechanics itself, we did have to defer that a little bit. So it's still on our radar. We would really love to offer players more like progression and customization and give them additional ways to unlock and improve the boat. But it's a little further out. So on our radar, if you have ideas for it, definitely post them on our feature upvote board or in our Discord. something we're hoping to work on, but haven't gotten to yet.
Yeah, we can say in the interim, the boat is a lot easier to handle, a lot more fun to handle and just to be on. So we hope that that's going to lift up the experience in general, but I don't want to spoil it. We should let Ben do a sneak peek at some point.
Yeah.
He's done a lot of great work on the boat, and we're really excited for you guys to check that out soon.
Yes. Awesome. Well, and that is, we are now 1 minute over. We're late. That is the end of the dev stream for today. So if you have any follow-up questions that we didn't get to, feel free to ask in our Discord. We'll upload a VOD of this soon too, so people can like rewatch it or recheck it out. But thank you guys so much for coming to the dev stream. I hope the new time slot was good. If you have feedback on that, let us know if there's a better time. Thanks for all the first-time chatters and new subscribers. That was really exciting. It's really awesome when new people come into the stream and are really excited about what we're doing. Join our Discord if you haven't yet. That's where we're definitely at the most and where we're probably the most responsive. So if you aren't in there yet, I would recommend joining the Voyagers of Nera Discord so we can answer your questions, help you through the demo. You can see sneak peeks and new updates as we're developing. Thanks for the first time chat, Moisa. Sorry about the fishing rod. I'll send that feedback to Ben and Billy. But yeah, thank you again so much for coming to the stream. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.